Hey y'all, this is Mackie from VRChat. This episode, we're going to take a look at creating some UI controls for our worlds using Udon. Specifically, we're going to look at creating a little volume slider to control the BGM volume in our map. So let's get started. All right, so very first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a canvas. Go to UI, go down here and look for this little canvas object. Let's go ahead and create that. And we're going to have a big canvas, like a ginormous canvas that's going to be added to Unity here. So we're going to have to shrink this down. But before we do that, we want to change this render mode to world space. Basically, this just means that this is going to be something that's going to be rendered in VR. You're going to be looking at it in first-person view. So we're going to want to render it in world space. So go ahead and click that. Next thing we want to do is we want to scale it down. So I'm going to go to scale here, 0.005, 0.005, 0.005. That should make it a little bit, in VR, it should be the size of your character. Next thing we want to do is change its position to render in the center of the map. So I just changed X, Y, Z. Go ahead and double click on the canvas and we should get the interface kind of rendering in the center of our map now. But it's a little bit rectangular. I want it square, so I'm just going to go make this 500 by 500 or 200 by 200 or whatever size that you want the canvas to be. You can just modify the width and height here. It's kind of inside the middle of the map, so I'm going to bump it up on the y-axis. I'm going to do this 1.6, and it's going to get pulled up a bit. And here's our basic canvas. We can start adding objects, buttons, and text and stuff to this thing. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we got our canvas set up. We're going to want to go and right-click on the canvas, go down to UI, and we're going to go ahead and add a button. And you're going to have a little button that's going to appear in the menu here, and we're going to want to change the text. Expand the button here on the left side, click on text, and we're just going to call this toggle BGM. Next up, we're going to want to create a slider for our audio controls. So go to canvas, again, right click on the canvas, go down to UI and create a little slider object. And by default, it just sort of spawns all of the objects in the middle. So you can sort of drag in Unity, you can drag the slider up or, resize the canvas or position stuff, other places in the canvas, wherever you like. So I'm just going to kind of put these two components close together. I'm going to go click on the slider here on the left side, and by default, our audio volume shouldn't be 0. It should be sort of in the middle when people first join our world. So I'm going to go down here. There's a value control on the slider component. I'm just going to go ahead, and that's between 0 and 1. Just going to go ahead and put that to 0.5, and that's going to kind of set our volume in the middle. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make sure that our layers are set up correctly. What do I mean by layers? Click on canvas, go over to the top right here. You can see that the layer is set to UI right now. This layer means in VRChat, it's the layer that the microphone icon and the icons on the HUD render to. We don't want to use that layer because it's not interactable. You're going to want to go over and change this to default, which will be an interactable layer. Change it to default, change the children object. The next thing you have to do is you're going to have to add a special VRC component called a UI shape. We'll go add component, type VRC UI shape. And once we've added this to our script, we should be able to launch VRChat and interact with this menu now. So let's go over to the VRChat SDK and start our client and test. So if you go into VR here, you can see that there's a little raycast tool over top of the menu now. That means we can interact with it. So as you can see, it's interactable now in VR. So let's jump out. All right, great. So everything's working, but we have no music. So let's grab a MP3 file and drag it into our project. I got a cool little vibe track. We'll just drag it in, let it import into your project. Next thing we're going to want to do is with the vibe track that I just uploaded here, this MP3 file, we're going to want to create a game object to hold it. So I'm going to go create empty from the side menu here. It's going to nest in canvas. We don't want to nest it in canvas, so I'll put it over here. And I'll rename this to music. And this music component, we're going to want to add a audio source component. And we're going to want to click on this little menu here and select our little vibe track we just uploaded. And I'm going to go ahead and click loop to make the music loop. And play on wake is checked by default. So that means when the game starts, the music will start playing. One last thing we have to do is we have to go over to add component again. And we have to add something called a VRC spatial audio source. So go ahead and add that component. And once that's added, everything should work. Once you log into VRC, we should hear that music playing, but there's this other option called far and that really defines how far the sound travels. But we don't really want 3D spatial audio. We just want it to play everywhere. So we're gonna go ahead and disable the spatialization setting. Just uncheck it, and that's just gonna make the music play wherever the character is on the map. Okay, so now that everything is set up, we can finally start adding some Udon scripts to these components. So let's go over to our button, click on the button object, and we're gonna go over here, add an Udon behavior, and create a new program, and open up Udon graph. Very first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a variable to hold our audio source. I'm gonna create a new audio source here, and I'm just gonna call this variable music. We're gonna have to make this a public variable, because if you look down here on the script, in public variables, there's no public variables. So we're gonna have to make this a public variable. Just click on this drop arrow here, make it public, and then it should just pop open as an option here. Now we can select our audio source for our Udon script to reference. Click the little button here, select your music component, and it should populate with the music audio source. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna drag that music audio source onto our Udon graph, and now we can start interacting with it. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to toggle the music on and off when someone interacts with our button. So we're going to call a function on audio source. It's going to be called set enabled, and we're going to turn off, enable, and disable the audio source when someone clicks on the button. So we'll go ahead and add a audio source set enabled function. And this value takes a Boolean value, true if it's enabled, false if it's not. In order to toggle it back on and off, we're going to use a trick that we learned last video. I'm actually going to get another function, and we're going to call something called get enabled, and that's going to return the value of whether or not the music is enabled or not. And we're going to get a bool from this, and a bool is a true or false value, and we're going to take the opposite value. So we're going to go ahead and draw another noodle here, and I'm going to call unary negation. Unary negation is going to give us the opposite value, and we're going to feed the opposite value from this into the set enabled function. And what this is going to do is it's going to toggle the music on and off. So it's going to get the current, whether or not that the audio source is enabled, flip the value, and that's what's going to get called into this set enabled function. So it's not enough to set up this. We need an event in order, like when the user interacts with a button, an event has to be triggered. And with buttons, if you go over here to the button script component, there's a little parameter here that says on click. And we're gonna have to create a custom event. We're gonna have to send a custom event when someone clicks on our button. So we're gonna go ahead and hit plus here. And inside of the object, we're just going to reference itself. So I'm gonna just drag the button into this on click function. And we're gonna click this drop down menu, go down to Udon behavior, and we're gonna want to trigger a interact event. So when someone clicks on this button, we wanna send an interact event to Udon in order to handle it. So I'm gonna go ahead and select interact, and we're gonna have to create the event over here in our Udon graph. So we're gonna go right click, create a node, go to events, and we're gonna have our interact event that we're gonna have. That's gonna be sent when the button gets clicked. And this interact event is going to trigger this set enabled function. So now when we boot up our game, we should be able to click that button on and off to turn the audio source on and off. Let's take a look. So I should be able to click on the button to turn it off, and it disables and enables the music when we interact with the button. Okay, so next up is our slider control. Let's go overhead to the slider, and we're gonna add a component. We're gonna add another Udon behavior to this object. And we're gonna create a new Udon program, and we're gonna load up Udon. We're gonna create a variable again. We're gonna create another audio source to reference our music. I'm gonna create this one, call it music. And we're gonna make this a public variable, and we're gonna drag it in here to use it in Udon. And if we scroll down to, we're gonna actually set our music public variable down here to music. And the next thing that we have to do is in the slider, we have to basically tell the script when this slider changes. And in order to do that, we can add a little callback here on the right side called onValueChanged. We can go ahead and create, we're gonna send a custom event, click plus. We're gonna drag the slider in itself in here. So we're gonna send an event to slider, which contains our Udon program. And we're gonna go down to Udon behavior, and we're going to actually send a custom event at the bottom here. So click on send custom event. And the custom event name, let's just call this custom event on value changed. And let's go and open up the Udon graph. So opening up Udon again, we need an event, we need to handle that on value changed event. So we're gonna create another node and we're gonna go to events and we're going to actually create a custom event. So go down to event custom. And in the custom event here, we're gonna actually put in what we set the value down here as, so on value changed. We're going to need a reference to our slider as well. So I'm gonna create another variable here and we're just going to call it slider. And we're going to rename this to our slider control. And again, I'm going to make it a public variable so it shows up in the right menu here. And we're just going to select the slider from the menu. And we're going to drag the slider into our Udon program. So we're going to go down to our music node here, and we're going to drag an audio source, and we're going to use this function called set volume. So when the value changes, we want to set the volume of the audio source. So when this custom event on value change happens, we want to hook this into the, we want to call the set volume function. And for the value, in order to get the value, we're going to take the current value of the slider. So we're going to drag a noodle out here from slider. And we're going to call a function called get, I believe that it's called get value, and that'll give us the value of the slider. So I'm going to drag this over here, and the slider values are going to go right into set volume. And this is pretty much it for the control. Hang on, let me fix that. So if I hit play, we should have a interactable slider now in our scene. So I should be able to turn the volume down now. So it should just completely lower to nothing. And if you can kind of turn the volume up, you can see you can actually control the volume. And we have our little toggle button to completely disable the music. So that's pretty much all there is to it. If you're looking for more kind of tutorials, please subscribe and I'll continue making some more tutorials. Thanks for watching, everybody. Cheers.